aren't they? Yeah. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Ramona Schindelheim. I'm the editor-in-chief with WorkingNation, and with me is Tamboura, who's the program manager for Zuckerberg Initiative. And this afternoon, we're here, we want to talk about the opportunity, creating better opportunity and access to the 70 to 100 million people who are affected by the criminal justice system, whether it's through parole, probation, jail, or prison. Before we actually start the conversation, a couple of things. WorkingNation, we're a nonprofit news and content organization, and we focus on storytelling, and that's telling the stories of solutions to the future of work and future of education problems. So as we've talked, people have talked, technology is changing the job market, workforce really quickly. We want to upskill people. So part of what we do is we look at the programs and tell them through short videos. And while we were doing that, we came across this one program inside San Quentin and now 2 other prisons called The Last Mile. And before we start talking, we want to show you the video that we created. It was produced by our content team and our executive producer, Melissa Panzer. So I invite you to take a look. In just a second. Oh, almost there. I could do play-by-play. Okay. Well, let's see. Oh, here we go. Nope.
There it goes.
That's not the right one. Okay, well, I'm going to tell you a little bit while we're there about Ali. Ali is now, as I mentioned, the program manager at Zuckerberg. And you will, as you watch this video, you'll see him.
Have you ever wanted something so bad that you were willing to risk everything that you had in order to make room for the thing that you wanted the most? Have you ever wanted something so bad that you were willing to look past the naysayers and hold on to the thing that you wanted without never doubting that sooner or later it would come?
I've been working here about 6 months, and every time I park in the parking structure, I could see the whole ocean. And I remember those times I was in prison and felt so suffocated. Now, I feel the breeze and it feels amazing. It doesn't get old for me. My name is Charles Anderson. I'm a software engineer in Los Angeles.
The incarcerated population in the U.S. is an absolute untapped resource. The dedication you get from these folks is huge. This is more than a job. This is a life mission for many of them, and that was really the impetus for starting The Last Mile.
WorkingNation is a multifaceted e-commerce platform, and we specifically help florists. Charles has been an incredible employee. He exemplified the kind of qualities that we wanted for that person that we were hiring. I didn't know his past. He told me his story, and I was floored.
My father was very abusive growing up. My mother tried to stop my dad, but that would only make matters worse. I seen the devastation on her face. It broke my heart. My fear for my father slowly started turning into anger. At the age of 14, I joined the gang. At the age of 19, I was incarcerated for 10 years. I felt my life was over. I have these crimes on my record, no education. Nobody's ever gonna give me a chance. Nobody's gonna give me an opportunity. The last 2 years that I had left in prison, I decided to take the last mile, and it was the best decision I've ever made for my life.
75% of those who are formerly incarcerated are unemployed within the first year. Without employment, there's more chance that when they come home, they'll go back. We believe that having a job is the key to successful re-entry and breaking the cycle of incarceration.
We're teaching people how to be free before they get out, to actually meaningfully impact what this person is going to do for the rest of their life, how they're going to be able to support their families. It's absolutely important.
No matter where you are in this country, people who are incarcerated, they return to you. And how do you want a guy to return to your community? Do you want a guy who's been sitting in prison, hardened by just the environment? Or do you want a guy who has some new skills and hope that he can take care of himself and his family? Which guy do you want coming home to you?
It's not just Silicon Valley and California where you're seeing technology, it's the middle of the US that has this appetite as well.
Indiana, like most states, has grappled with a recidivism rate that is too high. When you hear about a program that has a 0% recidivism rate, you start to wonder, how'd they do that? This has given people the skill set to get a job, a meaningful, fulfilling job where they are contributing to the bottom line. And for many folks, they've never had that before.
I have not had a lot of employment in my past, and I'm worried about my future. I want to be a productive citizen when I go back into society. The last mile, what it is for me, is the last mile of my incarceration. It is what I will build my life on when I leave here.
While incarcerated, graduates of the Last Mile Works can actually earn a market wage which they can save, so when they walk out the gate, they'll have money to restart their life.
There's a website that I'm developing that introduces people to help each other out. When I thought about having the site built, I didn't think, oh, I need to get some inmates. Where can I find them? It just sort of happened very organically. It's just such a strong message that wherever you are in the world, you can make a big, significant difference. Even people in a prison, and these guys are creating a site that has a potential to make a lot of social impact and make the world kinder.
These are people that want to work. These are people that have to work doubly hard to make sure that they can provide for themselves and their families. A lot of the guys that I went through the program with, they're shining stars in their organizations. If you want a shining star, hire a formerly incarcerated person.
Being accepted into the Last Mile would be the beginning of my future. These set of skills is what I will build my life on. It's the foundation of my life when I leave here.
This is going to move someone from the back of the line to the front of the line. So this Last Mile program really starts the first mile of the rest of their life.
I've been homeless, I've been poor, I've been a gang member, I've been a drug addict, but I'm a software engineer now. I didn't come out thinking, oh, I'm an inmate trying to get a job. I came out thinking, no, I'm a software engineer trying to get a job.
I feel privileged to know Charles on his journey. A lot of people, we take for granted our own upbringing and the support that we were given. He didn't have that. If he's come this far, think of what he can do now that he's got more support. He's gonna do great things.
My dream is to create little tech hubs in these underprivileged communities. And I don't want to kick these people out. No, I want them to be a part of it. I want them to join me. I want them to transform their lives and see that it doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter your past. If you have a dream, you have a vision, you have people that believe in you, you can make it happen.
One day you was bold enough to ask yourself the question, what if? What if we started to treat our last mile as if it were our first steps in reconciliation? What if? What if my life can be something other than this? What if?
And every time I watch it, I get all emotional. I'm sorry. Since the program started, no one who has gone through it has gone back to prison, which I think is remarkable. And, yep, I agree. And as you probably saw in there, Allie was in there, and Allie mentioned that the people he went through the program with, he was in the first cohort at San Quentin when, how many years ago was that the first?
2014, I think, was the first cohort.
Yeah.
It kind of still gives me chills. A lot of the men that are in the video, you know, I correspond with, and, you know, I spent many years of my life alongside with.
Yeah. And so I wanted, before we kind of move a little bit further on how it helped you, I want to kind of set the stage Tell us a little bit why you were in San Quentin, and
Sure. So prior to my incarceration, I dropped out of college, started a family, not in that order, and started a small geotechnical company in the San Francisco Bay Area. And my professional life was really taking off, but my personal life was kind of heading for disaster. And things like lack of impulse control, lack of emotional intelligence, and then being put in a really charged situation led me to make a mistake in that situation. And I was convicted of assault and subsequently sentenced to 17 years in prison. I was able to get some of that time reduced through an appeal, but I had never been system impacted or had any real significant engagement with the criminal justice system. And I, like most Americans, kind of thought it was fair. And I soon learned it was just really slanted towards putting black and brown and poor people in prison for longer periods of time, and nothing like what I thought it was.
Yeah. When we were talking before, you fully own that what you did deserved punishment. But
absolutely.
When the prosecutors came to you, they offered you a deal to try to I don't know if it's to clear their books or what, but talk a little bit about that, because I was shocked at what you were offered and what you ended up in.
Most, I think it's 97% of cases are solved using the plea deal system. And so the prosecutors use this technique called stacking the deck. So they will take, you did one offense, and they will find stuff in the penal code that's very close to that offense. So if you rob a bank, they will add conspiracy to rob a bank, transporting stolen goods, and all of these other enhancements to force defendants to take a deal. I thought it was incredibly unfair and incredibly slanted towards conviction. And because I had some resource, I thought, I'm going to fight this. And so they offered me a deal, which was, it was 28 months. Of that, I would have done half under California's current laws. And so it was a 14-month sentence I was looking at. Because I fought and lost, I was given 17 years. And the judge did warn me that if I didn't take the deal, that, quote, he would be merciless in my sentence. And he was.
That's to me, that's just shocking. And then you had the means to fight it, and you still ended up in there.
I still lost.
So while you were in prison, as you said, you didn't have any brushes with the criminal justice system before, so this was an entirely different environment for you. Plus, you also had your own business, a tech business, when you went in. Yeah. So tell me a little bit of what you saw in there and what made you go to a program like The Last Mile.
Well, the way the California prison system is structured is there's death row, which sits kind of at the highest security level. Then it goes levels 4 through 1. You get scored when you first go in, and it's based on a point system. And because of the number of years I was sentenced to, I ended up with a high score. And so I was sent to a level 4 murder max prison, where about 60% of the men who resided on that prison yard had life without the possibility of parole. I feel deeply that anytime our criminal justice system sentence people to death by prison, which is life without the possibility of parole, it creates a hyper-violent atmosphere, which is dangerous for not only just the other men serving time on that yard, but also correction officials, because you basically have men who have zero hope. And the amount of violence that I, witnessed on the level 4 prison yard, sometimes I still have night terrors, things that everything. I mean, I've seen men shot by correctional officers. I've seen people sexually assaulted. I think I was telling you one summer, my cellmate and I counted like 25 stabbings before we realized it wasn't prudent for us or healthy for us to count how many people were actually getting stabbed on the prison yard.
So that doesn't create an environment where you really are thinking about what comes next when you get out.
Yeah, and that's an interesting concept. When I was free, I felt like I had purpose every day. I had like today. I got up and got ready for this chat, or went and got my coffee and talked to my daughter. Just basic things in life, things that I kind of took for granted before I was sentenced to prison. But I had this purpose, and it was building my business and making sure my kids were taken care of, and making my mortgage, and just all those. When you land in the carceral setting, all of that purpose goes away, right? And it goes away really quickly. And then for me, I quickly learned that my purpose was I had to figure out how to survive. How can I get through these years of incarceration? And it was tough. It was super tough. One shining star was that I started taking correspondence classes, and I learned about this college program at San Quentin that actually had teachers in the classroom. And I wrote them a letter and had which is rare, I had a progressive counselor. And he told me, he said, "Ali, I don't really feel like you belong here. And I'm going to do everything I can to get you out of here." And so as my points went down, the way it works is every 6 months your points go down as long as you don't get into trouble. So staying out of trouble, and finally got my points low enough where I was able to transfer to San Quentin.
So you've only been out 3 years, right?
Yep.
So when you were, I think you told me when you were still in prison, you started writing your resume?
Yes.
Yes. Could you explain a little bit of that? I think you were doing some coding while you were in prison, right?
So when I was in the Prison University project, I considered myself like a math nerd, and I really pushed the executive director to bring in some higher math classes. And the prison's located pretty close to UC Berkeley. So we had some people from their math department brought in calculus classes, and so I spent a few years going through calculus 1, 2, 3, and then also doing the other higher ed until I finally graduated from the Prison University project.
Oh, that's great. And so when you were going to start looking for work, did you hide the fact that you were in prison?
So let me finish kind of my journey.
Okay.
After I finished the Prison University project, the Last Mile came in, and they ran an entrepreneurship program, and I thought, hey, that's great, and signed up and went through that. And after that was through, they decided they were going to bring in the coding program. And because I was a math nerd, I really thought oh man, this is just something that I want to do. And at the same time, my prison sentence was winding down, and so I started feeling this anxiety of and it's something I think all prisoners feel. After a while of incarceration, you lose kind of touch with the hardships of what it is to survive out here in the real world. You focus on all of the good things, all of the things that, and it almost becomes like a fantasy. And so as my time, my sentence wound down, the anxiety of, oh my God, this is real, I'm gonna go home, what am I gonna do? How do I get back in the geotechnical industry? I'm 50 now. When I paroled, it's going to take me too long to establish a company again. It takes a lot of years to build up your clientele and really be able to be profitable. And so just all of and then also rebuilding relationships with your family and your friends and your community. And so the anxiety was there, and when that anxiety hit, just coincidence, the Last Mile started this coding program. Yeah. So I applied for the coding program, went through the coding program, found out that my math nerdiness had nothing, it didn't correlate to really learning how to write computer code. But I thrived there, and then I paroled. I came home.
And is CZI your first job out?
No. So I went to work as a software engineer for a development shop in San Francisco, which was really awesome. I had a good time working there. And one of the interesting things that happened to me one day is I live about 70 miles south of San Francisco, so I had to ride the train in every day and take public transportation. And I was walking down the streets of San Francisco, and I heard my name being called, which is like, it's strange, walking down Market Street. And it was 2 other graduates of the last mile who were actually also working in tech in San Francisco.
That's awesome. And now you're working as a program manager for CZI, and you're working in the criminal justice initiative. Tell me what you're trying to do with that program when it comes to helping reform the criminal justice system.
So at CZI, we have 3 distinct pillars in our criminal justice reform program: transforming prosecution, expanding opportunities to formerly incarcerated people, and empowering the current criminal justice movement, giving them the tools, support, and technology to keep the momentum going behind this movement. It's become a bipartisan issue. Our nation really knows that this experiment with mass incarceration is not working. It's not making our nation any safer. And there are a lot of people incarcerated in our nation that really don't need to be incarcerated. There are people incarcerated for mental health issues, drug addiction. There's people that are that may have needed to be incapacitated, but not for the length of time that they've been incapacitated, and just the financial resources that it's draining out of our communities, both in tax dollars and both in resources. When you take a man or woman out of their community and put them in the carceral setting, you are taking a father, a mother, a cousin, a wage earner out of the community. So you're really, the collateral consequences of this experiment with mass incarceration is great. And now we have 70 to 100 million people who are system impacted. And many of them are struggling to find employment. Many of them are struggling to have educational opportunities, have access to health care, have access to housing. In fact, having a criminal conviction in our nation actually puts up, depending on which state, between 3,800 and 40-something hundred structural barriers to you being able to reintegrate into society.
We talk about, at WorkingNation, we talk a lot about the importance of having a job and being able to have access and opportunity. So access to the training and access to, the opportunity to, even be considered for the job. I think that's one of the things that strikes me, is that with so many people coming out of prison, you have businesses that maybe don't want to hire them.
And I think that's absolutely true. And for, when I came home, I faced quite a few, barriers. One, my age. Most people writing software are in their 20s. Also, my race. There is a big disparity in the amount of black and brown software engineers. And then third, I had this criminal conviction looming over my head. And one of the things that I like to tell the men when I go back to San Quentin is like, if you work hard, you can get by these structural barriers. But also as a nation, we really have to start thinking about who do we want coming home from incarceration? Do we want someone who we put a bunch of barriers in front of to basically keep them siloed out of mainstream society? Or do we want people who we feel can redeem themselves, take care of their families, take care of themselves, and contribute to their communities?
You were describing how you'd like to see the prison system reformed and make it more restorative, to your point right there.
I think the whole criminal justice system, if you think of it as a whole, and you have to start out with victims. Victims are the first kind of, the first thing we really need to focus on, right? the criminal justice system as it works now, it uses the victim for prosecution, and then when it's over, many of the victims are like, well, nobody's, now I'm here, I don't feel any better. Secondly, we have to focus on the offender. Nobody wants nobody I know anyway, right, will admit that they want someone to come out of the carceral setting and re-offend or re-victimize in their community. And third, we have to think about the people who are in the criminal justice system itself, and everyone from judges and prosecutors to police to correctional officers. They deal with an incredible amount of trauma working in the system, and so as a whole, I'd really like to see a system that restores the community at least to the point where it was before an offense happened.
Do you think there's an unfair perception of how often a formerly incarcerated person, recidivism, re-victimizes people? Yeah.
The recidivism thing triggers something in me because I think that's a false calculus. Really, the idea that if I don't have contact with law enforcement, I'm not rearrested, that I am a success story it's a false calculus, right? If I'm sleeping under a bridge or addicted to a substance, but I'm not rearrested, does that make me a success story? No. So we have to really rethink recidivism, and we also have to rethink like the dominant narrative in the United States that everybody that goes to prison is like this horrible person, and they have to have this transformation, and then now they're good, and we should embrace them. It's just not that binary. People end up in our carceral setting for a multitude of reasons. And it's not to be said that there aren't people out there that fit the dominant narrative. They are, but they are a very small minority of our prison populations. The people I met while I was incarcerated run the gamut. And the dominant narrative out here, especially what's shown in the media, is that it's just really, really, really hardened bad people in our jails and prisons. And we have shows like Cops and Lock Up, and in the media, if it bleeds, it leads. But that's not what our prisons look like for the most part. There are some very, very tough prison yards on the level 4 prisons, but there are also jails and level 1 and level 2 yards where they're filled with people. And that's why I really don't like to say prisoner anymore or inmate. When you say incarcerated people, you add that people aspect to it. And so in a perfect world, we'd get away from thinking of people in jails and prisons as what is depicted on television and the media.
Yeah, and in your case, you're a successful business before you went in, and at 38, and on your resume, it would you have a degree, you've taken training to code, the whole thing, and you'd be a model employee if it wasn't for that.
Well, I have to tell you,
You're not a model employee?
Well, so when I came home, I had to make a choice, right? I had to make a choice on whether I embraced being incarcerated or whether I tried to hide it. And I came home, and my original thought was, I want to put this behind me. I don't really want to embrace it. And then I had to reconcile, how do I deal with this gap in my employment history? And I got pretty creative. I wrote on you guys are welcome to look at my LinkedIn, but I wrote, basically I worked for the state of California. I was a GED teacher, I was a GED tutor, then I was a newspaper editor, and I worked at this kind of thing. So if you look at my LinkedIn or my resume, it really doesn't look like I have a gap, and that was just me being creative. But when it came time to get interviewed, in software engineering, we have they're called technical assessments. And so I was taking all these technical assessments and getting through the first part of the interviews, and then I wasn't getting calls back. And I know that's because I'd get to the point where the background check would come up. And so I had to make a decision. I just said, you know what, I'm just going to own this, right? And I crafted like a 250-word narrative that really I didn't say I was in prison. I said I was in a correctional facility. I didn't say I committed a crime. I said I made a mistake, and just really tried to soften the blow. And one of the things that it allowed me to do also is to control the narrative, right? Rather than just reading the state's side of things, which becomes like, I hate to say this, reminds me of a movie, Your Permanent Record.
Permanent record, yes.
But I got to say, this is what happened, but also, if you can get past this is the value I can add to your organization.
There's a movement, Ban the Box movement. How do you feel about that?
I love Ban the Box movement because as a program manager, one of my grantees is actually the organization that started the Ban the Box movement. There are problems with it, but it is getting better.
Well, it gets to that background check.
Well, people, just because they don't ask you on the application doesn't preclude people from still running the background check. And it depends on which geography. There's, like San Francisco, they absolutely ban a majority of background checks. But depending on the demographics, you're still, a lot of companies hire recruiting firms, especially in the software engineering realm, and the recruiting companies do the background check, and it's not really the company that's doing the actual hiring. So it's still going to come up. And then you also have data aggregators, so you have private companies. So there's the fact that even if you do, you are able to get your record expunged and things like that. That's still going to live in someone's data warehouse somewhere. So I think really as a nation, it's getting past the idea that people are not redeemable, or that's where we need to get to so we can just eliminate the idea that the worst thing you've done in your life defines you, because it just doesn't. I mean, I challenge everybody in here, and don't tell me what you did or if you did anything bad, but think about the worst thing you've ever done in your life, and if someone that's who they called you for the rest of your life, right? You stole the bubble gum at Walmart when you were, 5 or something. That's not who you are. Nobody on this planet is the worst thing they've ever done in their life.
You were talking a little bit with me earlier about the Second Chance Pell Grants, and I want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about that.
So that's one of the programs CZI is looking into right now, and that's, under the 1984 crime bill that the Clinton's administration signed, it took away federal funding for post-secondary education in the carceral setting. And so it basically left a lot of the prison programs that were teaching higher ed with no funds. There are a few that are running in our nation. One was at San Quentin, the Prison University Project. There's another one, Hudson Link in New York and Sing Sing Prison, that are 501c3 nonprofits. But all of the for-profit schools pulled out. So it really took away a lot of the educational opportunities for incarcerated people. And we know that people who have an education are less likely to commit crime. People who are educated while they're in the carceral setting are less likely to get out and reoffend.
So you go back to San Quentin a lot.
I do.
And talk to the inmates there, the incarcerated. What do you say to them, and what do you want them to know about what's available to them when they're there and out?
I mean, I go back for a few reasons. One, San Quentin is very progressive. It has a multitude of programs and a very, very low incidence of violence level inside the prison. And so part of it is for me to communicate with these programs and see how we can spread these programs throughout the country. I'm proud to announce that we launched the Last Mile under my portfolio in a women's correctional facility in Oklahoma a couple of months ago, which was really awesome.
Great.
What was even more inspiring for me was I didn't tell the Oklahoma Department of Corrections that I was formerly incarcerated. I figured when I turned my ID in, they'd figure it out, but they didn't. And so when we did the launch, and also got Governor Stiff, which is the first standing governor in Oklahoma to visit a correctional facility in 30 years, got him to show up to this ribbon cutting. And he got on national TV and committed to doing some reforms in his state. I don't know if you guys know this, but Oklahoma has the dubious distinction of being the #1 incarcerator of women in the United States, if not the planet. We're still looking into that, but so far it looks like they have per capita more people in prison than countries like Iran and Saudi Arabia where women really have it tough. But it's just an awesome experience, and I got up to the podium and I looked at the women and I said, believe in this program, because just a little over 2 years ago, I was in the same situation as you, and then looking over at all the correctional staff's faces, and they're going, "Oh my God, this guy was in prison." We didn't know, but it was just a really great feeling, and having the women, they sent me a card and thanks for believing in us, and that's I think that's the message I have to everyone here today is. We as a nation have to start believing in the 70 to 100 million people who are system impacted in this country. And if we keep them siloed, we are going to keep doing the same thing, right? We are, depending on the jurisdiction, people are returning to prisons at rates, it's like 70% in some jurisdictions, and it's ridiculous, and it's irresponsible of us as a nation. K through 12 spending has stayed pretty stagnant. Correction spending has gone up 800% in this nation to where it's like a $60 billion a year industry. Here in California, the corrections budget is $11.2 billion to house 132,000 men. Literally, you could give each and every one of those men an Ivy League education and put them up in an apartment and probably buy them a Ferrari for what we're spending on correction spending, right? And if we know that educational opportunities and vocational opportunities like the last mile, which has a 0% recidivism rate, work, why are we not doing it? Why are we not doing it at scale?
Ali, thank you.
Thank you.